By the time dessert came out, my father-in-law had told the same story 3 times. It was about leadership, or sacrifice, or discipline. With Frank, those words usually blurred together after his second glass of wine. The Veterans Day dinner had been his idea. He invited neighbors, 2 former officers from his Rotary Club, my wife's aunt and uncle, and a local judge he liked mentioning by title even when the man asked him not to. I spent most of the evening carrying dishes from the kitchen and staying out of the way. That suited everyone fine. Frank liked rooms where he could measure people quickly. Career, house, car, handshake, watch, especially watches. "You still wearing that thing?" he asked when I reached across the table for the potatoes. A few people glanced down automatically. The watch had scratches along the bezel and a faded leather strap I'd replaced twice myself. Nothing about it looked valuable. The crystal carried a thin crack near the edge. "It still works," I said. Frank chuckled into his wine. "Some men buy themselves a proper watch once they settle into adulthood." My wife looked down immediately. She hated these moments because she always wanted them to end faster than they could. I shrugged. "It was my father's. That should ended it." "Usually mentioning the dead creates at least temporary decency. Not with Frank." "Well," he said, smiling toward the table, "sentimental value is free, I guess." A couple people laughed politely because they didn't know what else to do. I remember looking at the watch after that, not angry, just tired. The thing was old enough that the second hand stuttered slightly before every minute mark. My father used to hold it to his ear at night, listening to it tick while reading reports at the kitchen table. I hadn't thought about that in years. 2 hours later, I was standing alone near the back hall of the country club, waiting for my wife to finish saying goodbye to someone from church. The charity reception downstairs had mostly dissolved into quiet conversations and folded chairs. Veterans Day events always ended that way, loud patriotism early. Silence later. I was loosening my tie when someone behind me said, "Excuse me." I turned. An older man stood there in a dark suit, silver hair cut close, posture too straight to belong to anyone except career military. I recognized him vaguely from earlier introductions. Retired 4-star general. People had orbited him all evening, but now he wasn't looking at my face. He was staring at my watch. "May I see that?" His voice had changed halfway through the sentence. I slipped it off and handed it to him carefully. The moment he touched it, something in him tightened, not nostalgia exactly, recognition. He turned the watch over and rubbed his thumb against the engraving on the back. I hadn't looked at the engraving in years because I already knew every mark by memory, for valor beyond measure, then initials. The general swallowed once. "Where did you get this?" "It belonged to my father." "What was his name?" I told him, and the man went pale, not theatrically, not movie pale, real pale, like his body had reacted before his thoughts caught up. For a second I thought he might actually lose his balance. Instead, he straightened abruptly and looked at me with an expression I still can't fully describe, shock mixed with grief. "Your father was Daniel Mercer?" "Yes." The general stepped back slowly. Around us, nearby conversations had begun thinning into silence. Frank noticed first. Of course he did. He moved toward us automatically, sensing importance the way some people smell smoke. The general was still holding the watch. "I haven't seen this since 1991, he said quietly. Nobody spoke. He looked directly at me. "You know what your father did?" I hesitated. "Not really." That answer seemed to affect him more than anything else. The general exhaled hard through his nose and stared down at the watch end again. "Your father saved 31 men during the Al Jubail extraction." He paused, including me. The hallway had gone completely silent now. Frank stopped beside us, confusion already creeping into his face. The general continued carefully, like he was choosing which parts of memory could survive being spoken aloud. "There was a communications collapse. Vehicles disabled, incoming fire from 2 directions." He shook his head faintly. "Your father stayed behind to restore the relay manually." I felt suddenly aware of my own heartbeat. My father had never talked about the Gulf War much. He worked maintenance afterward, drank coffee at dawn, paid bills exactly on time, fixed lawnmowers for neighbors who couldn't afford repairs. That was the version I knew. The general looked at me again. He refused a transfer after that operation because he thought another officer deserved the promotion more. A small, disbelieving smile crossed his face. I argued with him for 20 minutes about it. Frank tried to speak. I had no idea. The general ignored him completely. He carried this watch every day. He handed it back carefully. Said it reminded him time mattered more when other people were running out of it. My throat tightened unexpectedly, not because of the story, because I could suddenly hear my father winding the watch again, every night. Same chair, same silence. The general's eyes drifted toward Frank then, finally noticing him. "Your family? I'm his father-in-law." The pause that followed wasn't hostile, that somehow made it worse. The general looked between us once, understood everything, and said quietly, Then you have no idea who he really is. Nobody moved. Frank's face changed in stages. Confusion first, then embarrassment, then something harder to identify because people like him rarely experience public loss of authority, not humiliation, displacement. For the rest of the evening, people treated me differently, though I wish they wouldn't. That was the uncomfortable part. The same stories I'd been too ordinary to tell an hour earlier suddenly sounded important because someone powerful confirmed them. I hated realizing that. Outside, while staff folded tables inside the hall, Frank found me near the parking lot. Cold air, wet pavement, distant traffic. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "You could said something." I looked at him. "About what?" He frowned, frustrated already. "Your father, all that." He didn't talk about it much. That general acted like the man was a hero. I leaned against the railing. My father would hated hearing that word. Frank looked down at the pavement for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Not apology exactly, but close enough to reveal effort. When I got home that night, I took the watch off and held it in my palm a while before putting it back on the dresser. The crack in the crystal caught the light from the hallway. For years, I thought wearing it kept me connected to my father. That night, I realized something else. He never wore it to impress anyone either.